Welcome back to Almost Machining. I have a broken glass from an indicating mic that I wanted to fix, and I've already fixed it, but I want to show you some of the process that I did in achieving that fix. I knew it was a very small, thin plastic piece. The problem was it kept falling out, and I just put a little bend on it. I had it setting down. And I pushed on it a little bit, and as soon as I did that, it split and cracked. There was a nick on one of the edges here, and it just followed that and split the line right through it. So I ordered a piece of .030 Lexion, and then I went to thinking about how could I do this. So I made a small box, and I poured into that box some plaster of Paris, and then I used Carmex. It's just like a lanolin based lip balm to coat the lens, and I pushed it into the plaster of Paris and ended up with a mold roughly with the shape of the lens in it and a lot of plaster on top of it, and I used a razor knife to just trim around the edges to where I could get a piece that I could work with. I also knew that I was going to have to hold this in a lathe to turn the outer diameter so that it would fit properly. So I used, once the lens was complete, I had it on the block with the tail center, or the live center, holding a rubber piece, pushing this up against the block, and I held this block in a 4-jaw chuck and used it to center align things. I had to put a piece of tape behind it. I probably should have used clay, but the tape seemed to do a good job, but it did dig in on the center of the piece. And I tried a first attempt with it where I heated the glass with a heat gun, and then I had a piece of red pad underneath it, and I didn't pull off any of the plastic coating that protects the glass. And then I heated it up and I just pressed the form into the part, and it didn't do a very good job. It melted the heat, softened some of the outer layer covering, and it pressed it into the pad, and the pad put a depression into the coating, and it just came out just terrible in the raw shape. So what I thought was, well, I'll cut one out in a circle. So I cut one out in a circle, and I found that this bottom of this bowl is roughly close to what it needed to be. So I made the plastic piece come out to the edge here on the cup. Used the heat gun, heated it up, I warmed the mold up, and then once it got to a pliable texture, my finger kind of would stick to the plastic piece, I pushed this into it and just held it there until it all cooled down. Then I removed it, and what I had was a slight dome shape. I had the dome shape, and I also had the edges to trim. Then I set the previous lens on top of that and trimmed around so that I had a fairly close shape. Held it in the lathe, a 4-jaw chuck, got it close to center where I needed to be, and then just gently turned the outer surface down to the correct diameter. I got it close enough. I had to do a little bit of filing on it, and so let's take a look at what we ended up with. This is an import indicating mic. And I feel like the lens is as good as I could get it. If I would have ordered one to replace this, I don't think that it would have been as easy to machine the centerpieces, as I had already had a center in the part, and I was able to drill the center hole and then the 3 remainder holes without any issue. I did get one of them off. I just hand drilled them. So this is designed that I can, with a screwdriver, I can rotate the inner piece, at least alignment wise, and it kind of sets where the needle is going to move to and from. I normally just set it right at the bottom. There were some problems with this mic, so I had to take it apart, and the lens just kept falling out. So what I have is a fairly decent solution, and of course the range needles can be moved as well. So I didn't change any of the original operating of this. what I did learn in doing this were a couple things. The first one is that on my plaster Paris mold, I had to put this in my 3-jaw chuck, or 4-jaw, so when I grabbed it, I wasn't able to grab it as hard as what I would like to. I was afraid that the plaster would just split. So in thinking about this, the next time when I have to do another one, I'll probably start with a steel block that's roughed out on the top, just probably grooved, so that the plaster will adhere to it. So I have a block behind it that I can use to position in the chuck, and then create another box around it, pour the plaster in, get my indention set, and then carry on from there where the plaster is affixed to the steel backing. That way I can firmly grip the steel backing and move it around and still have a way to get ample force. The other part would be, instead of using a random kitchen appliance, just to go ahead and coat this with another layer of the release or lubricant or even baby powder, is to coat it and then create a secondary mold, or the other half of this, so that when they're pressed together you have a true mold and a true fixed position where they both come together, almost as if you were casting metal, or creating a plaster cast where you can have that material cast. And I think it's important to have a good solid block to grip and keep in the lathe without running the risk of cracking your existing mold. I have this indicator here that I have plenty of sheet left over. It was one that came with a purchase of some other tools, and it does work. I don't use these for precision instruments. I just use them for general indicating, or maybe checking how long or how far I've moved the carriage of the machine. But it's dirty. It has no screen on it, and the screen for this one is going to just be a flat plate. So I'll cut that out, create a block to hold it in the lathe, to turn the OD, to put inside of the ring, and restore this to where it's at least appealing versus being dirty. The needle's a little bit bent. I can straighten that out. When you're straightening needles out, or the indicating arm, always be very gentle with them. They'll snap. I've had them snap in the past, and try to stay away from the very, very small end the best you can. Any plaster Paris will do. Another utility that I used when I did the rewind for the motor was using dental plaster. Dental plaster is a lot harder, or I've used in the past Durham's rock hard water putty. That works really well. You can use a Scotch-Brite pad to clean up your surfaces to get a better fit. I was lucky in that I had a majority of the existing lens still. If you don't have a lens and it was curved to a particular shape, you can by hand just shape a curve that's adequate for your purpose onto a mold. Or if you really want to get technical with it, you can use a 3D printer. I have them. I don't use them very often. They need some work, and I'm not at the point to do the work. But you could 3D print a particular mold where you have gap for whatever size or thickness of plastic that you're going to be using. Or this was a Lexian, any kind of ABS plastic that's thermal formable, and build a mold where the two halves come together as a source to sink the heat. I guess you could smooth it with an acetone to get a really nice smooth finish, so that you're not imparting a finish into the lens itself. In this case, to prevent the impression, I just used baby powder, a light coating. I used the heat gun to blow the remainder of the dust off the surfaces, and it worked out real well. The plaster or any other kind of putty or hardened putty is going to more relatively absorb the heat, and it's not going to change its shape once it's heated. It's possible that I didn't really check the temperatures, so I don't know for sure, but if you were to overheat your plastic part for a very intricate mold, that you could run the risk of transferring the heat into the other piece and melting them all together into one continuous block. You probably wouldn't want that. I'm sure there are ways to go about doing that. The other issues that I may have ran into, or that I could think about, is using just a putty when you're ready to do the turning. Apply putty to the face so that you have something that's something that's sticky, or a double-sided. I think a double-sided tape. Double-sided tape probably would have been the best thing, because then it keeps the part from spinning as you're turning it. I was taking 1 to 2 thousandths per pass. I did cut around it with a pair of scissors to get it relatively close, and then it was a little oversized, so I used some filing to bring it down to the final shape. I can't really think of what else might be necessary for this. I think if I have another one that's domed, this one's going to be a flat one. All it's going to be is cutting out a round shape and putting it together. It could be that one might want to take something like this and have a shape that, well, here, so maybe I can draw something out where you want to have a lip, and then the dome, and then another lip. And that's something that could easily be created when you create your dome. If it was 3D printed, this type of shape would already be included. It would be included in that shape. You could have that, and your plastic would conform to your mold. And I think that would be a wonderful way to do it. Another way would be, once you have your rough shape molded out, if you have a lathe, you could even carve it by hand. But if you cast your casting material, is probably going to be a little bit larger than your actual working part. So you have an additional, these are the pieces of the plaster that you're going to braid with the rest of your block down below. And then you come in and you literally just cut away this flat area. This would be removed on both sides, where you still have your dome profile, and that would be one way to have a lock. You're going to get, you'll have aberrations from the lens, at least the way it bends and changes the light. So just keep that in mind, and you don't want to overheat or melt your lens. You just want it enough to where it is formable. And if your shape is a round shape, don't start off with a square. Start off with a shape that's round, preferably larger than what you're expected to get, and that way you don't have edges that are going to be not quite right. And this seemed to work, other than the discoloration from the cloth imprinting into it. So a double full mold will work a lot better. Thanks for watching. Try this sometime.